You've stood at a funeral before. Maybe you wore black. Maybe you said a few quiet words you didn't fully mean, just to fill the silence. It felt like tradition. It felt like something you were supposed to do. But the real answer to where that feeling comes from is far stranger than tradition. It comes from a fire that went out 100,000 years ago, and a small pile of red powder someone sprinkled over a body because they could not bear to just walk away. Your brain did not invent grief, it inherited it. Long before writing, before cities, before anyone had a word for religion, early humans were already doing something no other animal on Earth reliably does. They were burying their dead, not dumping them, not abandoning them to scavengers, burying them on purpose, with intention behind every motion. At a site called Kafze Cave in what is now Israel, archaeologists found human remains dating back roughly 100,000 years, arranged in deliberate positions, some with deer antlers placed carefully near the body. That is not an accident of nature. That is a choice. Someone knelt down. Someone decided this moment mattered enough to mark it. Why would a species obsessed with survival spend precious time and energy on the dead? Here's where it gets strange. Burial doesn't help you survive today. It doesn't fill your stomach. It doesn't fight off a predator. By every cold calculation of evolution, burying a body is a waste of calories you could spend hunting, foraging, staying alive. And yet the behavior persisted, generation after generation, across continents, across cultures who never met each other. That's because survival was never just about the next meal. It was about the group. And grief, it turns out, might be one of the most important tools a group ever had. Anthropologist Paul Pettit has spent decades studying the origins of mortuary behavior in early humans and Neanderthals. His research suggests that the earliest burials weren't really about the person who died at all. They were about the people who were left standing. A community that ritualizes death is a community that reaffirms its bonds. It says, out loud or in silence, you matter to us. And if something happens to you, you will not simply disappear into the dirt like prey. Think about what that promise does to a group of early humans huddled together in the dark, aware, in a way few other animals are, that death is coming for all of them eventually. It makes them stay. Neanderthals, a separate but closely related human species, may have understood this too. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, researchers uncovered Neanderthal remains surrounded by clusters of pollen, leading to a famous, still debated theory that flowers had been placed on the body. Some scientists argue burrowing rodents dragged the pollen in later. Others aren't so sure. But even the possibility rattled the scientific world for a simple reason. If Neanderthals mourned with flowers, then grief isn't a uniquely human invention. It's older. It's something that showed up before we did, in a mind that wasn't even fully ours. Sit with that for a second. The feeling in your chest at a funeral might not belong only to Homo sapiens. It might be a hand-me-down from a completely different species of human, extinct for 40,000 years, who looked at a dead companion and also felt they had to do something. Now here's the twist that makes this even stranger. Early burial wasn't gentle the way modern funerals are gentle. Some of the earliest graves show bodies bound tightly in the fetal position, knees pulled to chest, almost as if being folded back into the shape they held before birth. Researchers studying sites across Europe and the Middle East have proposed this wasn't just practical, to save space. It may have been symbolic, a return, out of the earth and back into it, in the same shape you arrived. Other burials tell a very different story. At Sungir, in what is now Russia, archaeologists found 2 children buried around 34,000 years ago, laid head to head, covered in over 10,000 painstakingly carved ivory beads. Each bead alone could take an hour to make by hand. 10,000 beads is not a quick goodbye. It's thousands of hours of collective labor, poured into two small bodies, by a community that had almost nothing compared to what you own today, yet gave nearly everything they had to say. This loss deserved permanence. You don't do that for someone who doesn't matter. And this is where the ancient world quietly folds into your own life. Because you still do versions of this, whether you notice it or not. You still dress up for funerals in specific colors your culture assigns to mourning. You still bring flowers, unknowingly echoing a gesture that may stretch back to a cave in Iraq. You still gather people together, even when there's nothing practical left to do, because some old, wordless part of you knows that grief witnessed by others is easier to carry than grief carried alone. Psychologist John Bowlby, whose work on attachment theory reshaped how scientists understand human bonds, argued that grief is simply the flip side of attachment. You cannot lose deeply what you never loved deeply. The two are stitched together, and they always have been. Every early human burial, every scattering of ochre, every carefully folded body is really just evidence of a bond that refused to end quietly, even after breath did. Ochre matters here too. Traces of red ochre pigment have been found dusted over remains at multiple ancient sites, sometimes covering the body head to toe. Some researchers believe the color red was chosen because it visually mimics blood, life itself, sprinkled back onto a body that no longer had any. A desperate, symbolic attempt to hold on to vitality even after it was gone. Isn't it strange that an instinct like that, to fight against the finality of death with color and ritual, survived tens of thousands of years, jumping from mind to mind, culture to culture, without ever being written down? That's the part evolution doesn't fully explain, and maybe doesn't need to. Somewhere along the way, grief stopped being just an emotional cost of survival and became one of its engines. Groups that mourned together, that marked their dead, that reaffirmed to each other, "I will not let you vanish unremembered," were groups that stayed cohesive. Cohesive groups outlasted fractured ones. In a strange, roundabout way, the willingness to grieve may have helped keep the species alive. So the next time you're standing at a funeral, in a black suit or a borrowed dress, saying words you're not sure you mean, know that you're not performing an empty custom. You're the latest link in a chain that reaches back before language, before agriculture, before almost everything you'd call civilization. Someone, 100,000 years ago, knelt beside a body in a cave, placed an antler beside it with shaking hands, and decided that this life would not just end and disappear. You still do that. You just call it a funeral now.